The debuts don't stop just because the calendar turned to February. Cover Killer Nation, it's time for us to talk about a band for the very first time, as far as I know. On the Cover Killer Nation channel, I'm fairly certain that this is the first time we're going to be talking about Exmortus with their new album here in 2014 entitled Slave to the Sword. Exmortus is a group that kind of has a bit of a hybrid sound to them, at least in my opinion. There is definitely a lot of root in thrash and in kind of like a melodic thrash sound to them. There's also a little bit of that neoclassical guitar playing that we've heard in a lot of power metal. We hear it sometimes with Yngwie Malmsteen. We hear it with a lot of different groups. We've also, in recent memory, maybe would associate this style a little bit more toward a European style of guitar playing, or some people may even say that these guys are the melodic thrash answer to Dragon Force. I think that's taking it a little bit too far, but to each their own, really. Exmortus Slave to the Sword 2014 release, their third release. They are on Prosthetic Records, and let's talk about it. This is a 10-track affair. It clocks in at just a little bit under 50 minutes in length, 10 being the track number of tracks. And this is an album that's definitely driven by a couple of different strengths, and one of which we already mentioned. The guitar work and the musicality on this album are both fantastic. It's something that really speaks very well toward their future. Now, whereas some of the thrash portions of this album that are a little bit more direct, a little bit more hands-on, user-friendly, seem to get a little bit of a basic feel to them, and something that kind of just feels a little bit more elementally driven toward speed, and a little bit more elementally driven toward setting a pace and setting that accelerated pace. This is something where whenever you hear the guitar lead, whenever you hear those more neoclassical tones, man, it is really something to listen to. It's really something to behold. It's very impressive. It's definitely something that you can say is a strength that this band really possesses. They definitely have a lot of shredding ability. They definitely have a good shredder's attitude. It's really just a compliment of how well they're able to really evolve that with each passing album, and how they're able to take that perhaps one or two steps further. Whenever you look at this album cover, whenever you first see it, you're almost going to think that you've stumbled upon some sort of strange, weird power metal band. But in reality, that's not the case whatsoever. And that can sometimes be a little bit off-putting for somebody who's just deciding to take a risk based on an album cover. Sometimes you feel that you can kind of go on and know what's coming. But in this juncture, you really don't. The vocals, to me, are a period or a portion of this album that perhaps need a little bit of polish, perhaps need a little bit of work. This is something that has a very gruff voice to it. It's something where it's very consistent. It's not as though we have voice breakage or anything like that. This is definitely a natural tone. It's not something that's being remarkably forced. It's just that there's not very much that is really done with this. This is something that kind of remains along the same pitch throughout the course of this album. There's not a lot of a vocal range deviation from one side to the other. You're not hearing anything go remarkably high. You're not hearing any sort of gruff, tattered lows. This is something that stays very consistent throughout the course of the album, and you would think the consistency would be good. However, in this manner, it almost has the consistency of a death metal album, where you have a voice that remains very gruff and very aggressively more toward the bass register, with that kind of growling instinct to it. Whereas with this one, it's something that stays a little bit more toward the higher end of the gruff register, and it kind of just maintains itself right there throughout the course of the entire album. Now, there are a couple of moments on this disc that really have a lot of redeeming factors to it. Their Moonlight Sonata Act 3 is a good track as a great example. It really showcases a little bit more of that classical side that this band definitely possesses. This is something that's in their repertoire. You can tell by the inclusion of this track and the way in which it is presented. It's Act 3, which you can only assume correctly that Acts 1 and 2 took place on albums 1 and 2. And this is also something that showcases a little bit more of the dynamisty that this band is able to possess, and really a side that they are able to bring out whenever they want, and it's one that you almost hope that they would bring out a little bit more. However, I feel that they're a little bit held back in some portions of time, just perhaps based around some ideas and some different concepts that they themselves have not yet really figured out about themselves. This is still a band that I feel is going through a little bit of a growing process. And certainly whenever you look at any sort of page that documents their bandmates, the members of the group, you can tell that there's been a bit of a revolving door whenever it comes to keeping members in this group for a long period of time. and that's something that can also somewhat discourage a real positive cohesiveness between the members. It's something where everybody's able to bring something new and exciting to the table, and they're probably best for the job, but whenever it comes to that gelling process, sometimes that feeling out process takes a little bit of time, and I feel that that's kind of what this album's all about. If they're able to maintain this same lineup for their next album after this one, I really think that that one's going to be a vast improvement. Not to say that this album is a slouch. But for right now, I'd probably give it a solid 73 out of 100. I say solid because they're able to maintain themselves throughout this album. It's one that does not dull itself over very quickly. It's one where some of the ideas can feel tired as you move forward and move deeper into the album. However, the presence of the Moonlight Sonata portion, I go back to that because it was just enough of a break in the action and enough of a break in the monotony that it really kind of boosted the album up a little bit. It was just that nice little characteristic nudge in the right direction that really helped this album along a good bit. Remember Gorguts' Colored Sands? Remember that almost symphonic / classical piece that they had that just was kind of baffling to a lot of individuals? Well, guess what? That really was a song that kind of stayed true in your mind. It's something that you'll probably always remember if you've listened to that album all the way through. And if you don't, then it's just not something that you're all that focused on. But a lot of people are going to remember that because it just seems so out of place. But that's one of the critical reasons why that album really went from, just being a tremendously good album to an even better album, because they took that risk, and that risk actually paid off for them, at least from my vantage point. This was a risk that they've been doing for a couple of albums for Exmortus. This is now Act 3 of the Moonlight Sonata part, and once again, it's something that is characterized by just really showcasing all of the band's vast talent, and it's something that needs to happen, I think, with a lot more veracity throughout the course of the entire whole. Still not a bad album, definitely one that I do recommend that you guys check out. What did you guys think about this album? What did you think about Slave to the Sword? What do you think about Exmortus in general? What are some of your favorite Exmortus songs, or some of your favorite Exmortus moments? Let me know, of course, in the comments below. Thank you guys, and I'll talk to you later.